Gang leader pointed his finger at the old man's chest and said, "You don't belong in this neighborhood anymore, Grandpa." What he didn't know was that same old man had once protected entire villages from 800 yards away in the jungles of Vietnam. Harold Mackenzie had lived on Elm Street for 37 years. At 75, he walked with a slight limp from shrapnel that doctors had never been able to completely remove. His hands were steady, though, always steady. Even now, as 7 young men gathered at the edge of his property like wolves testing the fence line, the neighborhood had been changing for months. Not the kind of change that comes with new families moving in. This was the kind of change that made mothers pull their children inside when the sun went down. Harold had watched it all happen from his front porch, where he spent most evenings with a cup of coffee. Most of his neighbors had moved away or stopped coming outside altogether. Mrs. Patterson next door hadn't been seen in weeks. The Hendersons across the street had put their house up for sale last month. But Harold stayed. Not out of stubbornness. He stayed because leaving wasn't in his nature. Never had been. The gang called themselves the Southside Serpents, though Harold thought they looked more like scared kids playing dress-up. Their leader was a 20-something with gold teeth and a swagger that screamed insecurity. Marcus Williams had been marking territory for weeks now, spray painting walls and intimidating anyone who looked like they might call the police. Harold watched them approach through the dim light of the single working street lamp. 7 of them, moving in a loose formation that would have been laughable to anyone with real tactical training. Harold counted them automatically, his eyes tracking movement patterns. A lifetime of training didn't just disappear because you got old. "Evening, boys," Harold said quietly as they reached the edge of his front yard. His voice carried the kind of calm that came from men who had seen worse things than angry young people with something to prove. He didn't stand up from his porch chair, just sat there, like a man enjoying the cool evening air. Marcus stepped forward, gold teeth catching the streetlight. "Old man, we've been patient with you. Real patient. But patience runs out, you understand. This street belongs to us now. Time for you to find somewhere else to spend your golden years." Harold nodded slowly, as if considering the proposal seriously. "Appreciate the offer," he said, "but I like it here. Good neighbors, quiet street, nice view of the park where I used to take my grandson to play ball." He paused, looking past Marcus to the other 6 young men. "Course, that was before you boys started treating the place like your personal playground." The smile faded from Marcus's face. "You think this is a joke, old man? We own this block. We own these houses. We own the people who live in them. And that includes you." Harold's expression didn't change. If anything, he looked almost bored. "Son, I've been owned by better men than you, and I've outlived all of them." That's when Marcus made his mistake. He reached out and jabbed his finger into Harold's chest, hard enough to rock the old man back in his chair. "You don't get it, do you, Grandpa? We're not asking. We're telling. You got 48 hours to pack your belongings and disappear." Harold looked down at the finger pressed against his chest, then back up at Marcus's face. For just a moment, something flickered in the old man's eyes. Something cold and distant, like he was seeing a different time and a different enemy. Then it was gone, replaced by the same calm patience. 48 hours, Harold repeated thoughtfully. "That's generous of you." He reached into his shirt pocket slowly and pulled out a cell phone. Not one of those fancy smartphones, just a simple flip phone with big buttons. "Mind if I make a call? Like to let my family know about the situation." Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the empty houses. "Sure, Grandpa. Call whoever you want. Call the cops if it makes you feel better. They don't come down here anymore. Not unless there's a body. Harold opened the phone and scrolled through his contacts. There weren't many. His deceased wife's number still saved after 3 years. The VA hospital, a few old friends from the VFW, and one other entry, simply labeled Son. He pressed the call button. The call connected on the second ring. Dad. The voice was professional, with the kind of authority that came from years of commanding respect. Everything okay? Evening, Michael, Harold said, his voice still calm, despite the 7 pairs of eyes watching him. Hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Never too busy for you, Dad. What's going on? Harold looked up at Marcus, who was still standing close enough to hear every word. Well, son, I've got some young men here who seem to think I should find a new place to live. They're giving me 48 hours to consider their generous offer. There was a pause on the other end. When Michael spoke again, his voice had changed. Cooler, more focused. How many of them, Dad? 7. Nice boys, I'm sure their mothers are proud. Harold's tone was conversational, like he was discussing the weather. The leader here seems particularly motivated. Are you safe right now? Michael asked. Oh, I'm fine, Harold replied. Just sitting on my porch enjoying the evening air. Though I have to say the company's not as pleasant as usual. Copy that, Dad. I need you to go inside and stay there. Can you do that for me? Harold chuckled softly. Son, I've been taking care of myself since before you were born. I think I can handle a few more minutes on my own porch. Dad. The single word carried enough weight to stop arguments before they started. Inside, now. And Dad, keep this line open. Harold closed the phone and looked up at Marcus, who was now looking less confident. Well, boys, my son says I should head inside. He worries about me, you understand. Thinks the neighborhood's getting a bit rough for an old-timer like me. What's your son gonna do, old man? Marcus asked, but his voice had lost some of its earlier swagger. Harold stood up slowly, using his cane for support. The movement gave the young men their first good look at the patches on his worn military jacket. 1st Infantry Division, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. My son's in federal law enforcement, Harold said conversationally as he moved toward his front door. Been with the Bureau for about 15 years now. Works out of the Tactical Operations Center downtown. He paused with his hand on the door handle. Of course, he's got a helicopter. Harold stepped inside and closed the door. The gang members looked at each other uncertainly. The evening wasn't going the way they'd planned. Old people were supposed to be scared. He's bluffing, Marcus said finally, but his voice carried less conviction than before. Old man's trying to psych us out with war stories. But even as he said it, Marcus found himself looking up at the sky. Just for a second. Just to check. Marcus was about to suggest they just leave when he heard it. A sound that started low and distant, but grew steadily louder. A rhythmic thumping that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The helicopter that appeared over the tree line wasn't the kind you saw on the evening news. This was military hardware, painted in the flat black of federal law enforcement. The aircraft circled once, low enough that the rotor wash scattered trash across the street. Spotlight beams swept the area, turning night into harsh, artificial day. When the light found the 7 gang members, it stayed there, fixed, unblinking. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. The helicopter settled into a hover pattern directly over the house. A voice boomed from external speakers. This is FBI Tactical. You are surrounded. Place your hands on your heads and remain where you are. That's when the ground units arrived. Not local police, but a convoy of black SUVs that moved with precision. They came from 3 directions simultaneously, blocking every possible escape route. Federal agents emerged in full tactical gear. Harold watched from his living room window as agents spread out in a textbook containment pattern. Their movement was professional and absolutely terrifying to anyone who found themselves on the wrong end of it. The gang members stood, frozen. 7 young men who had controlled this neighborhood through intimidation suddenly found themselves outgunned and completely out of their depth. Marcus's gold teeth weren't gleaming anymore. A figure emerged from the lead SUV. Even in tactical gear, Harold recognized his son's walk. Michael approached and raised the megaphone. "Harold Mackenzie," he called out. "This is your son. Are you safe and secure?" Harold opened his front door and stepped onto the porch. "I'm fine, son," he called back. "Though I think my new friends here might be having second thoughts about the career choices." Michael approached his father while his team maintained their positions around the 7 gang members. When he reached the porch steps, he pulled off his tactical helmet. "You okay, Dad?" he asked quietly. "Better than okay," Harold replied. "Haven't felt this useful in years." Michael turned to look at Marcus and his crew, who were now on their knees, being processed by federal agents. So these are the entrepreneurs who wanted to redevelop the neighborhood. The very ones, Harold confirmed. Young Marcus there was particularly insistent about the timeline. Michael nodded thoughtfully. "Well, Dad, these guys have been on our radar for months. Drug trafficking, weapons charges, extortion, assault. Tonight, they made the mistake of threatening a federal witness." Harold raised an eyebrow. "Federal witness? You testified in that corruption case 3 years ago, remember? Your testimony helped put away some very bad people." Michael smiled. "Technically, that makes threatening you a federal crime." As the convoy prepared to leave, Michael walked over to where Marcus was being held. The gang leader looked smaller now, diminished by circumstances he couldn't control. "You picked the wrong house," Michael told him quietly. "The wrong old man. My father spent 2 years keeping villages safe from people who thought they could take whatever they wanted through intimidation. 47 years later, he's still doing the same job." The helicopter lifted off first, disappearing into the night sky. The SUVs followed, taking with them 7 young men who had learned the hard way that some people can't be intimidated, and some phone calls change everything. Harold stood on his porch and watched until the last set of taillights disappeared. Then he went back inside, made himself a fresh cup of coffee, and returned to his chair. The street was quiet again, peaceful. His phone rang one more time. "Everything secure there, Dad?" "All quiet on the Western Front," Harold replied. "Thanks for the backup, son." In the distance, Mrs. Patterson's porch light came on, for the first time in weeks. Across the street, Harold could see the Hendersons moving around inside their house. Harold raised his coffee cup toward the empty street. Some battles ended with victories on foreign soil. Others ended with phone calls to sons who understood that family was about the promise to always have each other's backs. If you believe some fights are worth having, and some neighborhoods are worth protecting, hit that like button and subscribe to True Veteran Stories. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing in the world is a 75-year-old man with a phone number that connects him to people who still remember what it means to serve.
I just want to take a moment to say a huge thank you to each and every one of you. Folded hands, your love, support, likes, comments, and subscriptions mean the world to me. Without you, this journey wouldn't be possible. Every view, every share, and every encouraging word keeps me motivated to create more content for you all. I'm truly grateful to have such an amazing community by my side. Let's keep growing together and making this journey even more special. Red heart.